We made it. Sorry we're late tonight, guys. But we are, sometimes Jonesy needs more help with homework than I realize, and it takes a little bit longer to get into my evening than is called for at the initiation or the onset. But press on we must, and press on we shall. So there you go. All right. So we're talking about some awesome stuff tonight. Hi, Michael. Hi, Jamie. And we have a really great guest. For those of you that don't know, I've been working on a book this last few months, or a couple of months, I should say, for my dear friend David, who has become my friend through the process of drafting, writing, composing this book. How are you, Michael? And it's been a labor of love. For those of you that don't know, for those of you that don't know my work, I'm a book editor, in case you're new, and I discount my work 80% for combat veterans. That's like the approximate fee schedule that I can kind of use as a guide, because usually, hey, welcome.
Oh, hello, thank you. Thanks for having me.
So thanks for coming on. I was just telling our audience so far that I'm a book editor, and we met through the process of you seeking me out, or seeking an editor out. I think I kind of landed in your lap through a mutual friend via Facebook. And I discount my work 80% for combat veterans, because in this this literary world that I tread regularly, it's important to me that the stories of the history that I'm currently living about our global war on terror, it's important to me that those stories be told on paper properly with the correct additions of talent, if you will. So that my history that is, all around me gets told properly. We can read stories about our grandfathers, World War II, and prior to that, World War I, my uncles in Vietnam and Korea. It's important to me to be a part of and contribute to the stories of my generation's war, especially being the longest one in history, basically, that they be told properly. And if I can contribute to that in some small way, then I do.
Yeah, awesome. And you've been a huge help so far. So
I hope so. Not too much worse than your Green Platoon drill sergeant.
Yeah, not near as worse as some of those events.
Darn, I had such high hopes that I would be worse. I'm a very competitive person. If I'm going to be the worst, I want to be like the worst.
Right.
So tell us about it. So you started writing this book when? Like, how did it all kind of come? Just start wherever you feel good.
Okay, so I got out of 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment in January of 2014. And I was in Tennessee for a bit, and then I moved out to Colorado, where I was born and raised, about 6 months after getting out of the Special Operations community. And then I was like, gosh, there's so many good stories there, and there's so many great people and great relationships that I've formed throughout my time in 160th. And I realized all the books that have been told about the unit have been written by pilots. And so that's a totally different perspective than the perspective of someone who's enlisted.
Yeah.
And so I was like, well, I've got to tell a non-commissioned officer view of the unit instead of, commissioned officers take on the unit. So I was like, okay, I'm just going to start jotting stuff down. 10,000 words turned into 20,000 words, and then that turned into 50. And then, so that was probably 8 months out of the regiment. I was about 50,000 words in with
wow, that soon. I didn't realize it was that soon out of regiment.
Yeah. And so that was probably 8 months out of the regiment. At least that's what I can remember. I don't have the best memory, but so coming into 2015, the beginning of the year, I started, missing the unit and the brotherhood. And so I kind of stopped writing, and alcohol became the most important thing to me. So I stopped writing. All I wanted to do was drink and watch war movies. So it kind of snowballed and it went downhill from there. And I highlight a lot of this towards the end of the book. I didn't want to write about it, but after reading, you know, what we put together in the final manuscript, I'm kind of glad I was able to bring that story to light, even though it took some time.
Yeah. So you guys don't know this, but I'm not what is considered in the industry easy to work with, and that is by design. Book editor, we don't make like it. I feel like movies and TV shows and everything portray the editor to be like this be all end all, and we might have a higher IQ score, you know, than a lot of the group at the table, but we're not the ones making the big paycheck. The publishing houses are the ones making the big paycheck usually. But I know literature, and I know great storytelling, and I know English. My command of English is better than 99% of the populace, so I do know what I'm talking about. And when David came to me with his proposal, I was very on board very quickly. However, I had a couple of stipulations that I wanted him to kind of come to the table with in terms of the content of the book. And he indicated to me that he wants to reach people with the story. And I was so like impassioned by, you know, his drive and his desire to reach people. And I was so committed to that, but I kind of forced him to do something that was pretty uncomfortable, which was go through the whole, you know, emotional ride of that really difficult period of time in your life. And I think a lot of people don't really realize what it is. It's kind of tantamount to like getting naked and walking to the busiest mall in, you know, the biggest city near you. Only worse because it lasts forever. It's down on paper.
Right.
Like, would you agree with that? Or
oh yeah, absolutely would 100% agree with that. And by telling the story, though, you know, although I was able to put it down on paper, you know, there's a bunch of guys who get out and they're not able to put it down on paper, or they will never even get to that point because they end up taking their own lives. And so one of my hopes and end goals in writing that kind of dark portion of the book, and kind of my transition is to, in the very hopes that at the end of the day it could at least help one veteran, you know, reading what I went through, in turn maybe it would, you know, help them say, okay, he went through the same shit that I went through, and now he's kind of picking up speed again and coming out on the other side of the tunnel. So I'm glad I decided to write about that.
Well, and I don't know this for myself. Obviously, I can't speak to it for personal experience, but my supposition is that when someone who's going through something that's really trying and really difficult, if they can identify readily with someone who's been there and come out the other side like successful, you know, that's a very powerful thing, don't you think?
Yeah, absolutely. And everybody's journey is different. And, you know, for me, writing my thoughts and what I went through down in the end became more therapeutic than actually committing to objective that I was going to write and complete a book, because never in my wildest dreams would I think there's so many hurdles to go through after you get done writing the damn thing.
Yeah, that's kind of the easiest part.
Yeah, and that was a huge eye-opener because, you know, like I'm finding out, the Pentagon has to read it, and then they deem which divisions in the Army have to read it after that. So, and there's only one lady at the Pentagon who's in charge of reviewing and determining what's classified and not classified. So currently at the beginning of February, there are 15 books ahead of mine at the Pentagon. And then once she reads it and reviews it, then she said more than likely it'll go to USASOC and then SOCOM. And then the public affairs officers in those divisions will read it and then say, okay, take this stuff out, leave this, take this out. So it's, a lot of red tape, but I hope at the end of the day, when we can finally release it, it's great. I know it's different. It's going to be a lot different than anything anyone's ever read about the war, the global war on terror.
I can speak to that.
Yeah,
I can speak to that. It is such a unique perspective, and LA, I think everybody kind of that is on my friends list that's watching, that has watched any of my broadcasts before, they know that George is my best friend, and he was 275. So he has those unique experiences to talk about. And his perspective is so different from your perspective. And, I've read 15, 20, 30 books, about this subject matter, and I've not seen one like yours. So I can completely speak to the truth of that. Tell me, what was your first reaction when I sent the book back to you with my first round of revisions?
To be completely transparent, I was like, what the fuck? there was, I mean, I thought I wrote a good piece, but obviously this is your profession. And, the way you edit, you highlight stuff and then you put a comment with it. And yeah. I'd say 90% of the book, which was 130,000 words.
It's a beast of a book. For those of you guys that don't know what 130,000 words means, if you take your standard college essay, which is 1,000 to 2,000 words, and you take a novel that you would find at CVS while you're standing in line waiting for your prescriptions or something, those are generally about 80 to 90,000 words for a thicker one. So getting to 130,000 words is quite an accomplishment. It's a big read. So sorry,
yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh yeah, no worries. So
90%.
Yeah, I did feel accomplished until I got, your first notes back, and I was like, man, this is going to take forever. And, so far we've gone back and forth. I must have read it, 10 to 12 times all the way through now. And it's just, I start to memorize stuff, but each time I read it, I always catch something new, a different grammatical error or a way a sentence was structured doesn't sound right. So the writing the book part actually became the easy part. It's the editing that blows.
Yeah, it's tough. And I'm not like your standard kind of Random House or Simon Schuster editor that just goes ahead and does the editing. I mean, for the forward, I've been doing that, but I was charged to do that. So, and that was kind of the agreement between us, was that I would go through that and just do it myself, because it's just in the expedience of time. But I normally did you have experience writing prior to this? Did you always like to write? Did you journal? Did you turn in great essays in school?
No, I turned in horrible essays in school. I didn't do that well in school. It wasn't until I got out of the Army, that, the Army totally changes a man. So once you get out, you're determined to take over the world pretty much. And that's what I did, going to college and getting my degree. But prior to the Army, I was a poor student.
Yeah. So what I like to do when I'm editing a book, for the audience sake, is I like to make the notes, and then I want the writer to make the correction, because if they go back for a second book, then they know first of all, they know it was changed, and it is their manuscript that we're doing. So I take that extra time. It's faster and it's easier for me to go through and just correct it myself. But if we're both equally invested in this project, then they want to improve their craft, and they want to know what was wrong, and they want to know how to fix it, and they want to know how to better themselves, their grammar, their command of the English language, their written word, all of it. And it helps them to improve it if they are doing the corrections themselves. And I'll make notations, and I'll give commentary, like certain things that I love, certain things that I don't love, and ultimately it's to the writer to do it. So it is a very long, tedious, daunting process. And
yeah, because at first I was like, okay, she highlighted this one word, and then I click on it and your comment says delete. And I'm just like, why don't you just delete it yourself? It takes more time to write the comment delete than to actually delete the word.
It does.
at the end of the day, you know, you're helping me become a better writer, and in the hopes that I do a second book, you know, that'll help a lot.
That you'll go back for round 2, and now you're going to habitually say, oh, I always have to delete that. Forget it. I'm not going to put it in. So it does improve it. And I feel like the investment of time into my writers is beneficial for everyone. So I choose to make it. When I go for something, I'm all the way. I'm not ever halfway in. Nothing is half-assed with me. Not ever, not at all. So let's talk about what I think everybody wants to talk about, which is your transition out of the spec ops community. I think that you are so much more the rule than the exception in terms of having a struggle with transitioning out of the spec ops community into normal civilian everyday Joe life. So when guys like you separate, you have big plans, you've mentally like prepared yourself, you've walked through it, you've made the commitments, you've said, this is why I want this for my life is changing and it's time for me to change with it. I can't hold on to this thing forever. What made you like make that final decision to separate?
Well, for me, it was, you know, for those not familiar with the special operations community, it's nonstop. So whether it's training or deployments, or you rarely have time to catch your breath. And when you do catch your breath, you're on the next thing, turning and burning downrange. So for me, after 5 deployments with 160th, and I had met my girlfriend at the time, now wife. At first, when I was single, it was awesome. And every single guy in the special operations community will tell you it is awesome, especially when you're single. But once you start to figure out that, you know, there comes a time to settle down, it becomes a little more difficult and taxing when you start leaving time after time again and saying, I'm going to be gone just 30 days, or you come home and then you go to Virginia or California or New Mexico, and then you say, it's just a week. But those weeks and days and constantly coming home, leaving, those add up. I mean, it's just like, you know, putting a penny in a penny jar when you come home, and then eventually that jar is full. It's no different than deployments and training. I mean, yeah. So that's why I made the decision to get out. Obviously, you know, you form such a strong bond with all of the guys you work with, the brotherhood. So when the time comes when it's time to leave, it becomes even more difficult to stay on that side of fence of leaving, because everyone's like, oh, you're about to make flight engineer, or, oh, you could do this. We can do whatever we want. We can give you this bonus. We can get you downrange to get tax-free money, and then you come back, and we don't want you to leave. You know. So we're brothers. I mean, we eat together. We go on missions together, sleep together, cry together. You know, so when it comes time to go, it becomes, you know, a real fight. At least in my head, it was to leave or to stay. But ultimately, I chose to get out, and I definitely regretted it. A year later, and even 2 years later, and not a day goes by, I'm like, man, I wish I could just deploy tomorrow, and just because I knew what to do downrange and I was good at it. Mm-hmm. And once you get to a certain point in the regiment, you know, you start forming these relationships, and you work so closely with these guys. You go out on missions together, and then you become good friends with, you know, team guys that you end up working with. I mean, you not only deploy them, but you meet them later in Florida to go do overwater training or fast rope training or whatever it is. But so yeah, I miss it every day. But writing the book for me was very therapeutic in that I could kind of relive some of those experiences. And now that it's on paper, and once it's finally published, pending the Pentagon saying, you know, hopefully they say I don't have to take out too much stuff, but yeah. now that it's on paper, you know, other people can relive some of those experiences with me and kind of be put feet first in a role that not a lot of people know about.
Yeah. Well, I mean, riding shotgun for it was such a trip because, you know, you get those firsthand experiences. Some of them, I wouldn't call them overly graphic, but like it was a real emotional ride. You know, once we got through, you know, your training and you got on your deployments and everything, some of those stories were so heart-wrenching that like in fact one of them I had to share like with my older son. Like I had to read it out loud to him because I was so, you had me so ripped up, like, and I was just so compelled. I was like, listen to this. This is what I'm going through right now. Because I mean, they would come in my room and they know when I'm working. And they were coming in my room and I was just bawling, crying. And I mean, for those of you guys who don't, I'm very emotional. I'm very real with how I react to things. And I tell people I'm very honest about it. But it was so cathartic. And I was emotionally wrecked by the end of that chapter. And my son was bawling. And I read it out loud to him. I didn't even read the whole thing. I just read there's like a 3-page passage that is just, you can't not feel what it was, a little bit of what it was you guys were going through in those moments. And that's why I do it. And that's why I do it for like the rate I do it. That's why I discount my work, because these things need to be shared with our kids. And I was honored to do it with you, and I'm really excited about it going forward. So let's go back onto transitioning. If you had advice to give yourself, looking back to the you that decided to separate and decided to go forward and move into the civilian world, if you had like some really pivotal, great advice to give the you from back then, what would you have told him?
Oh gosh.
You can do it. Come on. Would you have said gainful employment, stay busy, read more books, take more classes? What would you have told him?
Gosh, that's a great question. I guess I would have told him that there's more to life than the military. Although, you know, I miss it every day, but you can impact the world outside of the military just like you did inside of the walls of Alpha Company.
Of course.
That's what I would say. Just something short and simple like that.
Yeah. And I think that I think that a lot of spec ops guys, they conflate the two of having an impact on the world and being there for their brothers. Because you all spend this intense time, the best of times, worst of times, just like Hemingway said, the best of times, worst of times, and it's together, and you forge this bond that's thicker than blood, and it's like deeper than the water, and you conflate not being there for them and having an impact on the world and living your life to the best of your ability and carrying on with your next mission, which is your family, your wife, you know, and moving into the world. You know, it isn't a forever thing. It's not meant to be a forever thing for everybody. And I think that the two get conflated a lot. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I don't know, you know, like I said, I miss it every day. And once you get really good at something and you get promoted and you move through the ranks, and then all of a sudden you're in charge of guys lower ranking, and that was you 4 years ago. So now all of a sudden you're in this managerial type role within the confines of the special operations community, and then your meaning in the Army, in the special operations community, takes on a different role. So now you're bringing up the guy that you once were 4 years ago, you know, right out of Dunker School, and, you know, starting on that crew chief journey. And for those of you who don't know what Dunker School is, I reference it in the book. So whenever that does come out, you should buy it.
I I don't endorse books. Like it's pretty rare, but I only work with authors with whom I'm a fan of their work because it makes it more enjoyable. Work for me, everybody should enjoy their work. If you're not enjoying your job in some capacity every day, you're in the wrong line of work. Um, but it's how I'm able to stay passionate about what I do at the level I stay because I love it. I'm a fan, and your book it's going to be great. Like when we're all done, I'm really praying that the Pentagon doesn't cut too much. This is the first time I've had to like be scrutinized by the Pentagon. So I don't know if I'm a little bit more nervous than you because I tried to get through everything. I was looking for things that I was like, gosh, maybe I wonder if that's going to be considered OPSEC. And I really didn't think there was, like, having read at least a dozen titles of, global war on terror, experiences, etc. It didn't seem like there was, but maybe they will. I don't know, maybe she'll be having a bad day, or maybe she'll like us and she'll be like, this is great, leave all the content. Who knows?
Yeah, who knows? And then as far as the book goes, we've been working on the forward lately, and you mentioned perspective, and the forward is being written by former 2nd Battalion, 75th Ranger Regiment Ranger. He was machine gunner, right?
Yes.
Part of the machine gunner.
He's a machine gun team leader.
Yeah. And hearing his perspective, compared to mine, it's like, it's night and day, but at the same time, we have similarities in that, if I'm at left ramp, behind the 240, and he's talking about, he's sitting right behind the crew chief, getting ready to do a fast rope infill, is like, okay, I was that guy, or I was next to this guy who was, one of my brothers who's still in, or, it's just cool. Yeah. Because, once he gets on the ground and we're still hovering, roping guys off onto the target compound, once they hit the deck and then the bird's offloaded, we're out of there. And so his perspective after that is foreign to me. So it's cool to hear, what the bird sounds like, when the guys on the bird hit the ground, and then, after we ascend, it's pure silent. So that was cool to hear. And I know we'll pull the forward together, so it'll be good.
It'll be good. We have enough talent between the three of us. I think we'll be all right.
Yeah.
But it's so funny because reading your perspective, and in the beginning when you're looking onto these guys, that are kind of taxiing onto the base at Kandahar, Bagram? I thought it was Bagram.
Kandahar.
And it was Kandahar. And then you become one, and then hearing George talk about them was like, because I asked him at first when I engaged your book and kind of started getting into it, because I'd only heard Red Night Stalkers a few times, like just a handful of times. And I was so curious at this point. So I was talking to George, and he, started telling me all about these things. And all I could picture, and still now, all that's in my head is like these dark angels of death that like come in the night on these giant helicopters, like guns blazing, just glowing muzzles, out of the helicopters, just laying down blankets of cover fire, like Rangers retreating. It just, all the imagination, it cooks up lots of awesome things.
Yeah, it does.
But that's like all I could picture was like between George's description and reading your words, your testimony. That's all I could picture. I was like, that's amazing. Mind blown. So shook.
Yeah.
Anyway. All right. So now I'm gonna put you on the hot seat just one more time. I promise this is the last one.
Okay.
If you could offer 2 pieces of advice to the young men that are coming out of the big Army, the big USMC, the big, the Air Force, whatever, just 2 little tidbits of advice, what would you tell them, like the minute they drive off base after they get their DD-214?
It's no harder than basic training. It might be tougher mentally, but if you go through the transition process with the same mindset that you did when you went through basic training or any really tough and rigorous military school, you'll be okay. And just know that you're not the only one, and there's a lot of resources out there for transitioning vets. So
Yeah.
those would be my kind of snippets of advice.
So keep your head up. You can do it. This is not going to be anything impossible that you can't reach. You have resources, so reach out and find them. Reach out and use them. Don't feel like you're alone. All of those things apply.
Yeah, absolutely.
So should they be pushing themselves to get a job they want quickly? Should they be pushing themselves to get in school quickly? Should they be evaluating what it is they want out of life to do long term, like right as soon as they separate? Because I think there's a lot of downtime. And I hear it a lot that there's like some lag time, like, oh, I'm finally free. I don't have to get up for PT every day. Fuck that drill sergeant, or fuck my first sergeant. I don't have to get up for PT. Get up out of here. Like, they're so relieved to have that freedom back, but I feel like they let the time go on too long. Instead of treating it like a vacation, they adopt this new life. What do you think of that?
No, there's definitely a lot of truth to that. I mean, right when I separated, there was about 3 months there where I just was kind of, relaxing on Fort Couch, as a lot of the guys call it, getting out. But, I got my Tennessee real estate license right away. But before I got out, I got my airframe and power plant license because I thought I wanted to work on aircraft, but I didn't. I saw a TV show and I thought I wanted to do real estate. So I did that for a little bit. But as far as people getting out and trying to figure out how their military MOS translates to something in the civilian world, for some MOSs, that's going to be easy for you. And for others, it's going to be like, well, I'm 11 Bravo infantryman. I'm used to kicking down doors and putting bullets in bad guys. It kind of becomes a little more difficult situation.
Yeah.
So I think leaning towards, utilizing the GI Bill and kind of picking something that, may have interested you through the years, maybe something you saw on TV or you were passionate about before you joined the military, is a good start. I mean, that's what I started, I started going to school and using the GI Bill. But after, being out for 4 years last year, I still don't know what I want to do,
Yeah.
But hopefully this book will kind of guide me towards that path, I guess.
Yeah, take you in a direction that you didn't realize was available to you before, maybe.
Yeah, I'm just, stay faithful, and I just realize, I just worry about the next 100 feet in front of me. Whatever's past that, I have no idea whether it's good or bad.
Well, it can
it's going to
change.
happen the way it's going to happen. Right.
It is. It can change. You never know what's behind that fog. It can change any minute of any day. So
Right.
Stay focused on the mission ahead of you, which is usually the next 100 feet.
Yep.
All right. Does anybody have questions for David? I didn't have him for too long tonight, and I'm not going to keep you. We're sitting on about 33 minutes right now. So if you guys have questions, I'm going to let you go ahead and ask them or get them asked now. But apart from that, we don't have a publication date yet for the book. It is currently titled Making a Night Stalker. And we are really hopeful that it will be hopefully a spring release. But again, so much is resting on the Pentagon and how long it takes them to get through, their stack of work that was in front of ours, or David's rather. What was your favorite helicopter to operate in?
I'm kind of biased, so MH-47 Golf Chinook.
Chinook.
160th Special Operations Platform Helicopter.
Do you know that's like a bucket list item for me?
To fly in a Chinook, or just a helicopter?
Yeah, well, I've never been in a helicopter, but if someone were to put every helicopter in front of me, including Donald Trump's fancy Bell helicopters, I would still pick a Chinook, like all day, every day.
Right.
Just because I would want to hang off the back ramp, like with it open, like you see at Fleet Week and stuff. Oh my gosh, I would die. Like,
yeah.
Answer correctly. Hey, is this one of your friends from the Alpha Company, Mike Lowry?
It is, and you might remember editing that I referenced this individual in several chapters.
I remember a Mike. Did you name him or did you pseudonym him? Do we
He
have a
he
Mike?
he goes by a pseudonym. Yes.
Okay, so we pseudonymed him. We'll
Yeah.
talk about that offline. Hey, Mike,
Yeah.
I probably loved your parts of the stories. I got some great feedback for David over some of those exchanges.
Hey. Yeah.
I don't know. I thought it was going to be a little bit more graphic. I thought you guys were going to be a lot more like coarse with your language. And I don't know if you like edited that for content so that you wouldn't offend people's sensibilities, which, like, case in point, you do alienate some of your audience when you use more rough language, more graphic language. If it's a little more coarse, like people like my mother, who is like a huge fan, like she was the one that shoved American Sniper in front of me and Marcus Luttrell's book, Lone Survivor. Like she was the one that read those first and shoved them in front of me. So my mom is like a fan of the work, and she is, you know, the one from whom I inherited my gift of, you know, the English language and my tremendous passion for reading. My mom always had a book in her hands on the days that she wasn't doing something else. And I read before I went to kindergarten. So, and that kind of surprises people, I think, pretty often. They were, you know, but I was sitting reading and doing phonics when she was being a seamstress. That was how
Right.
she entertained me at age 2, 3, 4. I was doing my letters already and reading books. So there's a lot rattling around up there all the time.
Yeah.
But you do alienate some of your audience when you use the coarse language. Now, I like it. I think I love authenticity. I want the gritty. I want the truth. I want to be riding shotgun. I want to be right there with the rudest of comments. My mother, not so much.
Right.
So where did your decision making lie in that venue, in that vein?
I guess when I was writing the book, I was so hyper focused on getting the stories so correct that I didn't have time to. I mean, the book isn't PG by any means, but I was so hyper focused in portraying an accurate, detailed account of certain things that happened and the way they happened. You know, being out for 4 years, you know, you try to remember back as best you can, and sometimes you text a Night Stalker buddy who was on that same mission with you or went through that same SEER class with you, and you try and recount some of these things. So maybe that's where the lack of language is, because I was so hyper focused on getting the story right. I didn't care to use so much foul language. I mean, don't get me wrong. There's a lot in there, but it's not, you know, it's not, you're not going to read like a sailor's novel, like cuss words on every page. But
I didn't think it was that bad. I was surprised. I'm like, wow, there's like barely any bad language in here. I was kind of like waiting for it. Is that bad? Who thinks I'm a weirdo for that?
And you would expect that from the special operations community, but you know, like I said, I was so focused after I decided to sit down and say, hey, I'm going to finish this book to get these stories right, because as you know, and a lot of people know, the only books that have been written, to my knowledge, about the unit were written by pilots.
Yeah.
And pilots, you know, I've worked with the best pilots in the world and I love them to death, but they have a different perspective of.
Well, I mean, if you even just think about the math of that, they are physically in the front of the aircraft. They have a completely different set of responsibilities. They have a completely different set of things to which they are paying attention during every single flight, every single mission. You know, your set of responsibilities, the things to which you're paying attention and focused upon during each mission execution, are completely different.
Right.
Just thinking about your proximity to, you know, each end of the aircraft, that only makes mathematical sense.
Right.
So having that perspective of, like, you know, seeing guys, you know, down a fast rope under, you know, possible small arms fire, and making sure that they all get down safely, and that you guys are, out of one side of the bird, covering them, and the other person or the other crew chief is like getting them down the rope safely, making sure nobody kills anybody going down, or knocks anybody off and kills them by knocking them off the rope. These things are stunning to read about as
Right.
someone like myself, standing by as a total audience member.
Yeah, and not just a perspective in terms of the back of the aircraft, but at the same token, a lot of these pilots come straight out of, West Point, or, they're normally older than the enlisted guys who are normally like right out of high school. So our minds think a little bit differently. So the humor is a little different. And then something we might think is hilarious, from a crew chief perspective, the pilots might say, you guys are out of your mind. That is awful, and I don't want any part of it. And that's, that has happened more than a handful of times.
Yeah. Like, you guys are idiots. It's like,
yeah.
You're like me with my kids. You guys are idiots.
Yeah, but once we put our flight gear on after crew mission brief and we're wheels up, it's 100% professionalism from communicating to the pilots up front to communicating with the rest of your crew on board. I mean, there's no time for joking when you're on a $54 million aircraft, and people's lives are at stake, whether you're training or deployed.
Yeah, and that whole one team, one fight becomes at the forefront of your mind, and what matters are to the guys to the right and left of you.
Of course.
Yeah. All right, guys, if you don't have any more questions, apart from the fact that you're a great singer, evidently, and I wasn't aware of this.
Yeah, it's one of my hidden talents that comes out, in the crew office. It's something the pilots, wouldn't know about, and only, certain crew members would, participate in something called crew member idol, where a new crew chief in the unit had to get on top of a conference table in the crew office, and someone got to pick a song for that person to sing while standing on the table. Mind you, this new guy wouldn't know anybody in the office, so it's completely, but it's a rite of passage. Everyone has to do it, and much like the rest of the special operations community, I'm sure there's time-long traditions that have people have something they have to do to prove themselves, and that's just one of them.
Oh my goodness, that's amazing. Oh
yeah,
I want to see video of this in the worst way now.
I'm sure I could dig something up.
Yes, that's gonna be part of my reward for getting this book published with you.
Right.
All right, guys. All right, David, you have been a sport about everything, about my snarky comments when I'm correcting, about being such a trooper through the production process of the book, because most people don't understand what an undertaking it is to go through revision and really gain a depth of understanding from the actual command of the English language. So know that you were a real trooper through that. You need more David. We can have David back on. We got to do this. This relationship is just budding in its newness. We're only a couple months old here. We got a book to get out. We have promotion to do. This is the first of many times we're going to do this.
Right.
We need better audience questions next time, though. I can't be the only one putting you on the hot seat. That turns me into the bad guy.
That's okay. You when is the next event? I'm not sure. We haven't really. We said we do this, and then
we're promoting. Once we have a publication date, I think we can come back on and get a little bit more into it and get a little bit more specific, and possibly do a little bit of reading from the book, because we'll know what we're allowed to, what's going to get published at that point. So once we have a date, we will announce another publication or another live stream interview like the one we're doing now. And if you just follow David's social media or my social media, I generally make the same announcements for milestones that, I'm involved with, so to speak, regarding publication and whatnot. But right now we're just kind of in a holding pattern, if you will.
Yep. And, that's the government. So
Yeah.
Is there anything you left out that you have thought about putting back in?
Good question.
Uh, that is a damn good question. Yeah, all I can think about before I go to bed is the book. Like when is the old lady at the Pentagon gonna, I imagine this one lady, her only job at the Pentagon is to review military memoirs, is reminiscent of the lady in Happy Gilmore, the grandma. Her fingers hurt. So I as so hopefully, I don't have to keep sending her changes, which I haven't, but I do think about some things I might have missed. Not necessarily missed, but could have added to make it make you feel more like you were in that setting, in that environment. That's what I wanted. That was my whole goal. Is the book is to, the majority of the book is first person. So when you're reading it, it's like you're behind the minigun, behind the 240, underwater in the Mets trainer, in the pool at the aquatics facility. So from touch to feel to all the senses, my goal was to, when someone picks up the book and read it, they feel like they're there. They are there.
They go on the
and
ride.
So, yeah. But if I forgot to put anything in, I've already started jotting stuff down for stuff I would consider putting in a second book.
Yeah. And I mean, there's always that plan of attack, and, we're not by any means finished. The Pentagon lady could come back and say, you can't have this, you can't have that, or, this has to stay, this has to go. And we could be in for like a really serious rewrite, in which case, we'll go back to the drawing board and we're going to produce something that's going to be great. And David's going to write something amazing that, he now has the skills to do, because he's accumulated them over this whole daunting process. So
yeah, but if you think about kind of the books that have been published over the last 5 years about the global war on terror, yeah, and what some of those guys who have gone through the Pentagon review process were allowed to publish, and thinking back on my book, there might be a few things, team names or mission names that we might need to black out. But yeah, if I compare, although it's not apples to apples comparing two books, but as far as content goes, I don't see a lot of it getting taken out. Maybe some SEER school stuff that they don't want people to know. I don't know. I don't work at the Pentagon, so I don't know.
I don't know. Again, I only know from what I've read. I don't know from, firsthand experience, but it didn't seem like you breached any lines that hadn't been breached by writers before you. You didn't cross, any unseen barriers with what you shared.
Yeah. And a lot of what you read in the book, you could Google that word or Google, something about a certain mission, and it would pop up in the news on, the first line in Google. So it's, I'm not trying to make enemies, and I'm not trying to cross any lines. All I'm trying to do is get a story out there that of a very prestigious role within 160th that not a lot of people know about.
Yeah.
And, as you know from writing the book, in a lot of books that have come out, the role that I held in the unit was crew chief, but in a lot of books they call us door gunners or fuelers. So yeah, so so
I love how you went into that too. That was like one of my favorite little passages.
Yeah,
that's gonna be a good one. All right, any more questions? Who's your favorite, most influential person from the book, and why? Do we want to answer this, or do we want to wait until next time?
I think he's using a SEER school tactic there to get something out of me that he maybe knows the answer to.
Oh, so he's leading? He leading the witness, boss?
Yeah,
Your Honor, I'd like to redirect.
might be a rhetorical question, but so far, so I've given copies of the final manuscript to everyone who was in the book. I'm pretty sure I've gotten it to everyone who's in the book, and so far the feedback's been really good. You know, the reason I wanted to give it to all the people who are in the book is not only did they play a major part in my life and me growing to become the person I am now, but also because I wanted to make sure that I portrayed that certain event as accurately as I could have.
Got it. What sets your book apart from other military written memoirs? Can I field that one? Do you mind if I take it?
Sure, yeah.
So what sets David's book apart and is uniquely his in terms of military memoirs is his point of view, his perspective, and his MOS. So we don't have a lot of books that entail, or describe intimately the life of a Night Stalker or the crew chief role or any crew on a Chinook for that matter. You know, you will read some certain, memoirs or things from pilots. There was a passing section in Lone Survivor about some Night Stalkers when they infilled on Operation Red Wings. They were infilling in QRF and they were shot down. And then there was another crew that had to come in right behind them after their brothers were shot down and then infill a group of Rangers to go find Marcus Luttrell. So it's all very errant passing things. This book is a complete from inception, from genesis of I want to do this job, how I got to it, how I trained, what it involved, all the shit I went through to get there, and then it's mission execution and combat tours. So the perspective is uniquely David's in that I have never seen this before. And I've read at least a dozen titles, and that's a very modest estimate of the global war on terror. And it's mainly, you get, team guys, you get a lot of Ranger Regiment, battalion guys there. They like to write. They're good at it. Leo Jenkins and Marty Skovlin Jr., Nick
Nicholas.
Irving. Yeah. Like there are many of these guys that are tremendous, writers, and it's great, but I've never read a book like this from this perspective. So it was very riveting for me. And I'm someone who has, read a lot of books, more than like 18 in my life.
Thank you. Well, that means a lot coming from you. I appreciate it.
Of course. Speak of the truth. All right, I'm going to let you go. People are going to keep asking questions now that I've opened it up, but we're going to save some for the next time we stream live, unless you really want to get to something. I'm going to let you go because I know you have to get on the road. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This was good, and yeah, we should definitely figure out next time to do it.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Again, guys, stay tuned. Watch our social media. You can follow David making a Night Stalker underscores in between words there on Instagram. And he's setting up the Facebook page, or he has set up the Facebook page for it. You can find it through mine. I'm going to be adding the links in the description for this video. If you are David's friend and you really care about him succeeding with this book, you will share this video and you will continue to stay tuned and help us get this book promoted, because we're going to do it straight up grassroots. Everything's going on us. We're not letting the publishing company take over here and dictate what's going on, what's happening, and how much promotion the book gets. We're doing all of this by the sweat of his shiny brow.
And it is pretty freaking shiny. Look at that.
Thanks for tuning in, guys. If you haven't shared yet, share now. If you haven't liked yet, like now. And we will see everybody soon. Stay tuned for more information, because this book is going to be large and you don't want to miss out.
Right on. Thanks, Kendra. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. All right. We'll see you guys later. Bye. Ciao.